So it's that time of the year again where we begin another year of the Moving Forward series for all 28 of this MLS team. And we kick off with the 2022 MLS regular season edition of the Moving Forward series with the Houston Dynamo. And it's kind of disappointing that I have to start with the Houston Dynamo because I think they were one of the first one that I talked about with them. Finished dead last season in the league for the second year in a row, and it seems like they're looking to try to maybe complete the hat trick or finish dead last this season, with them finishing 13th right now in the Western Conference. And it's also kind of a shame the fact that, this year for the Houston Dynamo, there was a lot of optimism that maybe things were going to change. They finally got rid of their owner and finally got a new GM in place, and it feels like this was going to be a new era for this Houston Dynamo team. I mean, they even changed their logo, and the one that I'm wearing right now is actually not the logo that they currently are using. And that, yeah, there was a lot of excitement in the Dynamo fan base. But what we got this season was another year of frustration and another year where I mentioned many times with this team going through a deep rebuild. Yeah, they definitely did not make any or little progress in terms of the deep rebuild and trying to get this team back to where it was considered to be a powerhouse of a team back in the MLS 1.0 and 2.0 era. Now, so far this season, they are at 9-6-17, and they have 33 points. They scored 40 goals this season while allowing 52 goals with this 12 goal differential, and they're currently 13th in the Western Conference, which in some way they did make some progress in terms of the standings. I mean, they did finish back-to-back season dead last in the Western Conference, and that they're definitely hoping to avoid of becoming the FC Cincinnati of the Western Conference, finish dead last in their respective conference, 3 straight in the running. Now, in terms of the top goal scored so far this season, you got Seba Ferreira with 10 goals, so it shouldn't be a big surprise because this was a big acquisition that the Dynamo got during the off-season. And while he definitely showed his flashes in the middle part of the season, he has definitely been a non-factor in the second half of the season, and kind of also is maybe be not surprising that is the case, because it feels like Seba Ferreira's season has really kind of summarized the Dynamo season, where when he is scoring, this team is doing well, but when he's not scoring, this team is definitely going through a rough patch. Then you got Darwin Quintero with 8 goals, followed by Fafa Pico with 7 goals. Then you got Orferson with 4 goals, and then Corey Bear finished with a disappointing 2 goals this season. Assist leader for the Houston Dynamo, yeah, Adam Lundqvist is actually the top assist leader for this team. And this is no disrespect to Adam Lundqvist, but if Adam Lundqvist is your top assist leader, then you have serious problem in terms of the number 10 position. And I'll definitely talk about that in the disappointment, and also in the moving forward part of this moving forward episode about the Houston Dynamo. But yeah, Adam Lundqvist is actually leading the team with 5 assists, followed by Coco Carrasquillo with 4 assists. They got Darwin Quintero with 4 assists, Corey Bear with 3 assists, and Seba Ferreira finished with 3 assists. Now, the highlights for the Houston Dynamo. And anytime when I do a video where, I talk about teams that is near the bottom of the respective conference, it is kind of hard in terms of me finding any highlights. But yeah, I mean, I had to come up with some highlights, and at least I would say that they kind of got off to their usual good start. I mean, they were definitely in the playoff hunt, at least in the first month or two of the season. And they actually did a little better in terms of being on the road. And this is kind of one of the things that I've mentioned before, where I feel like this season, yes, the Dynamo still suck on the road, but when you watch some of the road games that they have this season, they actually have looked competitive in some of these road games. And that last game against LAFC was a prime example of it, where even though they did come off with a loss, if you didn't actually watch out the Dynamo play in that game, you would have not known that they were actually being very competitive and was really going toe-to-toe with LAFC at time. And if they could have just been a little bit more clinical in terms of their finishing, then who knows how that game, of course, would have turned out. So that's definitely a step up in terms of the fact that, this team, as I mentioned, the reason why they have struggled so much on the road is because they just basically get run over whenever they go on the road. I mean, Dynamo fans have always mentioned whenever they go on the road, it's an automatic L, and it kind of is because of the way that this team just feel like whenever they go on the road, it's like playing against the best team every single week. But at least this season for the most part, they've been more competitive. And not to mention, they have won 2 road games this season, which is not only more than they did last season, because they didn't even win any last season, but probably more than the COVID shortened season, because I also think that they didn't win any road games, or at least I think they only won like 1 road games throughout that season. But the lowlights for this Houston Dynamo team, I mean, yeah, it's the usual collapse in the second half of the season. I mean, this has been kind of the case for the Houston Dynamo for the past couple of years, where this team always tends to get off to a good start and give hopes of their team that maybe things are going to turn around, and then the collapse happened in the second half of the season. They went through a brutal stretch where I think they went winless in 16 games. Yeah, when you win winless pretty much almost half of the season, you are not going to make the playoffs, and it's not a big surprise that of course, is the case, and that they are once again being the bottom feeder in the Western Conference. Most of the placeholder veteran have turned out to having an underachieving / bust kind of season. So, as much as I know the Dynamo this off season decided to sign a bunch of placeholder player and sign a bunch of well-known kind of placeholder name like Steve Clark and such a thing, and also bring back some of those placeholders that they had last season, like Tim Parker. Most of them have been having a very underachieving season. I mean, besides Steve Clark, I think most of the placeholders that they had this season has been very underwhelming and has not reached the level to really at least keep this team competitive as they continue throughout this rebuild. And then lastly, the other lowlights of this game or lowlights in terms of their season, is the fact that there's little to no progression in this rebuild. Again, in order to show some progression in the rebuild, you need to, of course, at least get some resort. I mean, in terms of competitiveness, I do think that this Dynamo team has been more competitive than what we saw last season. But unfortunately, just because you are showing more competitiveness, resort basically show itself. And unfortunately, the resort just haven't shown for this Dynamo team, and this is why a lot of people are saying that, well, yes, they have been competitive and they haven't been squashed every single game, but when you look at the result that they had, it's pretty much the same. And at the end of the day, result is what you get in terms of the measuring stick of whether or not if you make some progress in the rebuild. And like I said, the little progress is the fact that they have been more competitive than what we saw last season, but still, the results are not showing, and that's why many people are saying that there has really been no progression that's been made in this deep rebuild that they're going through. Now, in terms of the biggest win this season, now this is not necessary in terms of the highest scoring that they had, because I know when you always look in the Wikipedia page to look at the biggest win, they always mention, the biggest margin of victory, but this is more due to the fact that I was going to talk about what is the biggest win this season for the Houston Dynamo, and there really isn't a lot of big win this season. I can say that the Dynamo will be very proud of. I mean, maybe the one where they beat the Galaxy 3-0 might be impressive on the road, but it seems like they always have done well against the Galaxy. Or maybe the 2-1 win that they had against Inter Miami to snap out, or not the 2-1 win, but the 3-1 win against Inter Miami on the road was very impressive, because they finally snapped that long winless run on the road. I'm going to go with the 2-1 win that they had against LAFC. I mean, yes, that was the game that they were kind of battered in terms of the fact that LAFC had a lot of chances, and they were very unlucky to not put more than just one past Steve Clark there. But that was just a game that shows the competitiveness and showed the fight that this Dynamo team has shown this season at time. And they were able to get a big 2-1 win in this one to really play spoiler in terms of LAFC chances of winning the Supporters' Shield, and also talk about that discussion of the fact that are they going to be looking like the 2019 teams and going to maybe get 80 plus points and easily smash the record that the New England Revolution hold in terms of the most points that has ever recorded in the MLS regular season. But the biggest loss this season and the worst loss this season, I mean, this is not even close. It's a 6-0 loss that they had against the Houston Dynamo. In fact, it was such an embarrassing loss that I actually even forgot to put the name Houston in that. And that, yeah, I mean, that was easily the worst loss this season, but also the worst loss in their franchise history, because, well, yes, I know the Philadelphia Union has pretty much been putting up ridiculous amount of goals, especially in the second half of the season against everybody, but yeah, I mean, that was just an ugly game that the Houston Dynamo play on the road, and kind of reminds you a little bit of the Houston Dynamo of the old, where whenever they go on the road, especially when they play against a good team, not only the fact that they have no shots of winning, but yeah, they're going to get absolutely destroyed, and that's exactly what they did in that game against the Philadelphia Union. Now, in terms of the average attendance, 16,122, which is good for 20 seconds in the league. I mean, I've been talking about many times, the Dynamo has always been a team that has struggled to attract fans to get to watch this team play at PNC Field. But I will say this season, it has gotten a little bit better. I mean, there has definitely been more fans that have come out, and I think a lot of that has to do when they decided to get Hector Herrera in the middle of the season. That was definitely a move to get Butts in the seats, and there was time where Butts was definitely in the seats more than we've seen in the previous season that the Dynamo has had. But still, that kind of attendance number, and with the way that they're still in the bottom half of the attendance, just to kind of shows you the fact that, yeah, attendance has still continued to be an issue for this team. And again, I think it's still just kind of a mixture of the fact that this team has been so bad for so long. It's hard to kind of help your attendance case if you basically continue to suck every single year, as we have seen this team gone through ever since they last make the playoffs back in 2017. Now, in terms of revelation, and talk about players that had a revelation and kind of had a great season, well, there wasn't really a lot of players that I can choose. I mean, you might think I might choose Seba Ferreira because he scored double-digit goal, but, with the amount that they pay to get him, I still feel like it was kind of a little bit underwhelming that he just have double-digit goal. I mean, for a guy that they pay a record amount for like $5 million, you would think that he probably could be right up there in terms of the Golden Boot race right now in MLS. But instead, I'm going to give it to Coco Carrasquilla. He's a guy that I don't think he's been mentioned a lot in terms of being one of the most dynamic midfielder and one of the most dynamic attacker on this Houston Dynamo team. I mean, the last game against LAFC basically proved that he absolutely bossed that midfield that the Dynamo has had, and that's something that we have not seen the Dynamo has done a lot this season. As one of the other reason why this team has been so bad is that the midfield most of the time has been non-existent, and especially on the defensive midfield side, where it basically is like a revolving door with how things have gone every single game. But at least in the attacking part of game, even though they kind of still lack in that number 10 role, even though they thought Hector Herrera was going to be the case, at least Coco Carrasquilla has definitely provided that spark, and that, yeah, he easily, I think, is the biggest revelation and the MVP of this team this year. But the biggest disappointment this season, there was definitely a lot of players I could have chose, but it's got to be Hector Herrera. I mean, with the namesake, him coming into this Dynamo team, and that, I know at first it looked like this was just a move to kind of get people to go watch Dynamo games and gets butt in the seat. But I also thought that this was a move for them to really show that, yeah, they are going to be a team that is trying to attract some well-known name, and also hope that they can attract this well-known name to basically play well in the league. And Hector Herrera is a guy that, he's not old by any means necessary. He's not like one of those players where it's a well-known name that decide to come to MLS to just kind of finish off their career and kind of just continue the discussion of why MLS is a retirement league. No, he still is almost near the end of his prime, but he still could be a guy that can definitely do well in MLS. And yeah, that has not been the case in ever since he has arrived with the Houston Dynamo. Like, the fact that he is not even on the top assist list just shows you how he has been having a very underwhelming season with the Houston Dynamo. And we'll see whether or not if that can change this, because this is a guy that is also on the Mexican national team, and that if he wants to keep his spot in the Mexican national team, he's got to perform, because this was absolutely a horrendous season that he has in his standards, and that it also got so bad that he basically wasn't at times even in the starting 11, because he wasn't really providing much for this Houston Dynamo team on the attacking end when they thought that was going to be the case. Now, moving forward for this Houston Dynamo team, I mean, just like last season, they're looking for another new head coach after Paulo Nakamura didn't work out. And, I will say with Paulo Nakamura, I always thought that this hiring was kind of weird, and in some way, it seems like it's probably not going to work out, because, he's a guy that hasn't really gotten a lot of MLS experience experience in terms of being the head coach level, and the time that he did coach with Sporting KC2, that team basically finished as one of the worst teams in the USL Championship. Now, before you give me that argument, well, what about Steve Cherundolo? You know, he's a guy that comes to LAFC and also was part of a team that is the Las Vegas Lights, that was one of the worst teams in the league, but look where LAFC is. Well, here's the thing. The difference between Steve Cherundolo and Paulo Nakamura is that with Cherundolo, at least he has the decent enough talent that LAFC has been able to resource. That's not been the case for Paulo Nakamura. I mean, when you bring in an inexperienced head coach coming into a rebuilding project, and with the way that, you know, the style that I think Cherundolo decided to put with LAFC, I think it kind of has worked out very, very well, which was kind of a little bit of a surprise for me, but I think you got to give a lot of credit of him able to find a great style to really get the team to be a supporter shield kind of title team. And that cannot be said about Paulo Nakamura. I mean, the system that he was running, which is kind of very similar to the one that Peter Vermes did with Sporting KC, a kind of high pressing kind of system that he tried to use with this group of players, and it did not work whatsoever. I mean, he tried it many times in this game, and that the players clearly didn't understand the system, and it doesn't play the system well, and it just kind of got to a point where I think you know, he eventually these players just kind of gave up of trying his system. And you know, when you have this kind of situation where players clearly give up in terms of the system that their head coach wanted to be, and also the head coach started to lose the locker room a little bit, it's no surprise that Paulo Nakamura was eventually shown the door. But that's also kind of what I said in that video about the firing of Paulo Nakamura, and a big indictment to the front office, because I think now for this next head coach hiring, they absolutely need to get this right, because this Dynamo fan base, although this has been a loyal fan base that have gone through a lot of tough time in the past couple of years, they know that if this front office don't get it right, then I'm pretty sure the fans are going to quickly turn. I mean, look what happened in DC when they decided to hire a head coach. Took a long time to do so, and then it didn't turn to work out, and it's no surprise that the front office has gotten a lot of heat from DC fans. Restart this deep rebuild. So again, you know, it's a restart for this deep rebuild. You're just thinking that maybe getting some help, especially in the midfield. I mean, the midfield is clearly something that they need to help. There's a lot of things that they need to help, but the midfield is definitely the first thing that they need to address, especially on the defensive midfield. And that if they can address that, then you know, they can admit that they're once again restarting this deep rebuild, and hope that heading into next year they're going to show much more progress than what they have done in terms of trying to restart this rebuild so many times in these past couple of seasons. And then lastly, moving forward, is that hope that young Keystone Foundation like Seba Ferreira, Coco Carrasquilla, and Griffin Dorsey can continue to develop. I mean, they do have some foundation in this deep rebuild, and some young Keystone Foundation that can definitely sparkle in the league. And these three players that are some of the players that I can know that they can definitely be part of this foundation to really build a core for this Houston Dynamo team. But the question is, we'll see whether or not if they can develop this young core, and that, you know, in some way they kind of have to hope that is the case, because again, you know, the first step of a rebuild is to recognize what is going to be your core player, or some of the foundation that you can use to really start to build a strong team. And that, I think these three guys are definitely going to be the players to do so, and they're definitely hoping that is going to be the case. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the moving forward series of the Houston Dynamo. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and as always, what do you think are the highlights and the lowlights of this season for the Houston Dynamo, and also the biggest revelation and disappointing player this season. And then most importantly, moving forward, how is this team is going to look heading into next season. And oh, by the way, I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning of the video, and I can't believe I'm mentioning now. You already know this. I kind of change it up in terms of the moving forward series and how I do it this season. I want to kind of mix it up and kind of change it up, because I don't want the same old boring, just talk about the top goal scorer, the top assist leader, the highlights, and the disappointment like I've done in the past couple of seasons. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video. And as always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.